Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm your host, Dan Tilson, and across from me, I have my ever-trusty Catholic side host, John Byram.
What's up? How's it going?
Hey, man. We are entering the Easter season.
Already? Is it already here? Is it that time already? Is Lent almost over?
It's basically over. It ends at Holy Thursday.
What?
Yes, I know a lot of people think that it ends with Sunday morning. That is not true. But we have a really cool episode today, especially for Catholics who have felt unwanted, people who have been pushed away by their parish, or maybe just haven't felt like you've belonged. We're going to walk through the really cool untold stories of Easter theology and what it means for your life and why that should help you feel a little bit more confident as you work through whatever it is that your parish is failing to support you. So, today, we're going to talk about Pope Leo has made some more changes in the Vatican leadership. There was a huge shot fired at him from a bishop in Belgium in an Italian newspaper, and it's shaking the Vatican at the moment. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what Holy Week really is liturgically. I think a lot of people don't realize that Easter exists within it. So when you are in Holy Thursday, you are actually in the beginning stages of Easter. And we're going to talk about what that has meant historically and what traditions that we have lost over time as the liturgy has changed. So, John, do you have any cool stories from this past week?
Cool stories. I don't know. I mean, some people might find it cool. One of my favorite hobbies to do is I really like enjoying to go see. I enjoy seeing new movies. I'm an AMC A-lister. Unlike the viral video that's going around, I do not stand up in the theater when they play that ad and wave at everyone. I sit there quietly, but no, I got to see on launch night Project Hail Mary.
Yes.
Nice.
It's
really,
not
really
a
cool.
Catholic movie.
It's not, but he did welcome the stranger. So maybe loosely. But no, it was a really good movie. It was a really great time. It was absolutely fantastic. And honestly, it was the first 5-star movie of my personal rating of 2026.
Do you remember when we were in middle school and everyone had to read not Lord of the Rings, it was, Chronicles of Narnia. And you'd read that, and then if you went to Catholic school, your teacher would be like, and Aslan, the lion, he's Jesus. And we'd all be like, wow, this is a Catholic story. Is there anything like that with Project Hail Mary?
I didn't get any like strong Catholic vibes. I mean, there is the idea of a sacrifice for the betterment of humanity kind of thing. You could nitpick a couple things and kind of twist it into Catholicism, but overall I didn't really get a big religious vibe to it.
Okay, but you recommend we all go see it.
It was a great family friendly sci-fi thriller. Doesn't have any language, doesn't have any indecent parts of the movie like everyone's terrified to go to the movies and see nowadays. It was a very clean, straightforward movie. I don't think there were too many cuss words, if any at all. I don't really think, to me, cuss words are cuss words. I don't care. But if that's something you're conscious about, I don't believe there were that many, if any at all. But overall, I thought it was a very, very good film.
I'm going to go see the movie now just because I want to find out how nose blind you are to cussing.
I mean, I was raised by a sailor, so I'm probably very nose blind to it.
So earlier this week, I was giving a tour of my parish, as you know, the Italian parish in Washington, D.C. So it's beautiful. I'm not saying it's better than your parish, but it is beautiful.
He's secretly saying that.
And we have 3 large reliquary display cases because the history of the church being founded by the Vatican delegate in 1913, there are a lot of saints' relics in there. Mm-hmm. Somebody pointed out to me as I was giving a tour, like, oh, hey, what's that handkerchief? And I said, oh, Padre Pio used that. You know Padre Pio, right?
Of course.
Yeah, there's a huge devotion to him in Italy today and really around the world. And one of the last great known mystic saints. So I said, yeah, it's a handkerchief. I don't think that should be on display. And they were like, well, why? And I was like, well, you can't just, it's a Kleenex, right? It's a cloth Kleenex. You can't just blow your nose and be like, that goes on display in a church. You're giving me a face. Why is that?
Obviously relics are faith aids.
Right.
But there's also different levels of relics. First class relic obviously being like a piece of the body, like a bone in most cases. third class being an object that has come in contact with a first relic, and then a second class relic is like, I would imagine what like his clothing.
Right.
So would his handkerchief technically be a first and second class relic?
So this was a really weird side debate / tangent that happened during the tour, because I was like, there's no way that, somebody has a cold and they blow their nose and now like, oh, this is holy mucus, right? Because that's gross. But I was like, there's just no way. And somebody said, but what if a drop of blood got on it? And I was like, oh, we're getting too technical now, because now that you have brought in the idea that this may have touched the essence of him, right? We don't consider tears to be like the essence of the person, but blood is.
Yes.
I don't entirely know why. It sort of makes sense. But the bottom line is, theologically, God works through matter. He works through physical science. So this is one that has somehow brought people in our parish closer to their devotion to Padre Pio.
It works.
If he blew his nose, it shouldn't be on display. But if he blew his nose a little too hard, then it is validly there. And that is kind of like the ridiculous conversation that we devolved into.
I would have loved to be there for that conversation.
But I do have to say this. Even if it should not have been on display, it was a really good reminder that Padre Pio and all of our saints, really, they're not just statues.
Yeah.
Okay? We have this idea that they're almost fairy tale characters, but that, no, they're real living human beings like us. And we believe that in this afterlife that they're praying for us. So look, even though I was weirded out by it, apparently there's some good that's come about it. So that was the start to my week. That was my big Palm Sunday discussion. So Pope Leo just made a big shift in the staff at the very top of the Vatican. Here in the United States, we kind of call it chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, they call it substitute. It's like substitute teacher. Well, historically, it's a lawyer. Pope Leo just picked Paolo Rudelli, who is a doctor of moral theology. And as you know, on this show, that's what we really love, because moral theology deals with a world that is not black and white, but it's in the gray.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we love doing, because that's how you're going to reach people who have felt kicked away by their parish. At the same time, Rudelli is a canon lawyer. And you know that even though I respect canon lawyers and totally understand why we must have them, I'm also afraid of them. And so I have absolutely no idea what this is going to be like. But it reminded me of some conversations that I've seen that have taken place, for example, at Gregorian University in Rome. Professor Wilkins said, for too long, the church's strategy in the Vatican was to wall the crisis out. So all of the scary big changes in the world, all of the bad things that may be happening, the idea was the church is simply going to build a wall and we're not going to talk about it.
Or just sweep it under the rug. One of the two.
Yeah, that, unfortunately. And when you have a moral theologian in, they are inherently primed to dive into just how complicated something really is. So, we talked about this on a previous episode, how Pope Leo chose a canon lawyer to live with him, but a canon lawyer that comes from a diocese with a great reputation for listening. So I'm really interested to see where this takes him. On the other hand, I was thinking more about that lecture, and Professor Wilkins said, look, from the 18th century to the 20th century, so for 200 years, the church preferred to teach Catholics all about logic. Logic, philosophy this, philosophy that. And we totally set aside this attitude of discovery. Now, I know Pope Leo has been really good about talking about the emerging threats from artificial intelligence. The reality is that's here to stay. And how are we going to maintain our belief in God? Well, computers are potentially our overlords. But having a moral theologian gives me a great deal of comfort. So, John, you and I were talking a little bit about the changes in the Vatican. And, Professor Wilkins said that modern history and science showed us that many things that we thought were eternal laws once upon a time, were actually nothing more than culture. I don't know. Can you think of anything? Can you help give any examples or color that in for the audience?
A prime example for you. So if you travel abroad and you're an American, you know that Americans have a reputation for traveling abroad. We'll call it a stereotype, if you will. Loudly, a very loud stereotype. Or as I like to say when I travel, I check my American. One of the things that here in America that is culturally accepted is the practice of tipping.
Yep.
And yes, it's gotten out of hand. Yes, they're asking for tips for everything now. And it's, I think we're in the moment of a tipping uproar.
Yes.
A tipping revolution.
Thankfully, Gen Z seems to be killing that trend.
Thank you. But that's new for the US. Tipping in other countries in their society is either seen as disrespectful, something that is just not culturally accepted, and they get confused by it. So I feel that like this would be a prime example would be when an American travels abroad without educating themselves on customs and traditions of the country they're traveling to, there could be that really awkward faux pas moment.
In high school, I was studying French, and keep in mind, I took an incomplete. I suck at French.
But I made a deal with my Spanish teacher in high school to pass.
I don't even want to try and pronounce the word here, but I remember Mr. Sullivan telling us that the word for tip, it sounds like poor boy, right? So it's a little insulting right off the nose.
You should really try to say it.
Pour boire.
There we go.
All right, send the letters. Tell me how incorrect that was.
Bring a little culture to the podcast. I like it.
Well, he told us this warning story. He remembered a time in Paris where he saw an American trying to get a taxi, and the American tried to pay in US dollars. And the taxi cab driver was super insulted. But then the guy gives him a $20 tip. And so the taxi cab driver became doubly insulted to the point that he took that Andrew Jackson and threw it out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was our teacher saying, Americans think that everybody does things exactly as them. Now, to be fair, the French also feel the same way. I remember 15 years ago, a French person visiting New York City, and they were like, "Oh, I got the taxi." And I was like, "You have cash on you?" And they're like, "No, I'm paying with my card." We didn't do that 15 years ago. And they're like, of course a taxi takes card. And it's like, okay, all right. So we get in, and of course they don't.
Yeah.
So basically, every culture has this tendency to assume that what was always was, and everybody does that. And that's a pattern that we have increasingly become more aware of in the church, not with relationship to what it is that we believe so much as how we express it, right? So I think that what Pope Leo is doing here could be preparing the church for either Pope Leo is going to start addressing things himself, or he's expecting people to fire shots at him. Kind of like what happened this week, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You and I have been to Antwerp together.
Beautiful.
Right? Why were we in Antwerp? A year ago, by the way.
Almost. Like I said at the time.
Antwerp is in Belgium, by the way.
We need to celebrate the 1 year with a reunion trip back
Heck
there.
yeah. So, well, I'm sorry. I can't afford that with the fuel prices right now.
No, well, I checked plane tickets just to go to Iceland. That trip is on ice at the moment. But, we were there for a blessing ceremony.
That's right. So Chris and I had our ritual blessing ceremony. It's one of only 6 dioceses in the world that have Vatican permission to do these ceremonies for gay couples or divorced and remarried couples. Mm-hmm. Again, if you remember, we weren't standing at the altar where they would normally put
Correct.
a couple that's getting sacramentally married. We had to stand on the other side of the altar rail.
Yes.
It's like a very small but very strong signal that we're here to accompany you. We're not making a sacrament. Okay?
Correct.
All right. So Antwerp is a part of Belgium that speaks what language?
Flemish.
Not many people speak Flemish.
No.
And it's don't try, by the way, because if you have even the slightest mispronunciation, they will pretend as if they have no clue.
Yes.
Is this worth retelling?
I love this story.
I invited the priest, who I'm very grateful for, to come to our, obviously it wasn't a wedding reception, but to our dinner afterwards. And I said, it's at Elf de Gabad. And he goes, what? I've never heard. And I said, but like every travel book in Antwerp mentions this restaurant. Apparently it's like one of the best. What do you mean you haven't heard of it? And he goes, that would be Elf de Gabad. I was like, well, it sounds like you said the same thing, just faster.
Yes.
So, point being...
And he was so sincere about it, too.
He was. No, this was not him being facetious or like stuck up. He actually didn't understand me. So, anyway, the bishop of that diocese, Johann Bonny, I like his diocese. There are a lot of volunteers. This is not a dead diocese.
Yeah.
They don't have many priests. They have a lot going on, though.
Yeah.
In fact, the priest that did our ceremony was the pastor of 15 parishes.
I would say one is enough, but 15,
no.
15 seems like purgatory on earth.
I know. And only 20 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, they had 1,000 priests. So this diocese has seen a really rapid decline, partially because of the abuse crisis and how the church was actually sweeping this under the rug, as you said. So his diocese has a lot going on in very positive ways. I would challenge you, if you're like, hey, I have a cool parish, I would challenge you to go over there and check out their parishes and see just how active the laity are. But they're not, culturally, they're not like us.
No.
Okay? You and I talked a little bit about this before. We're not quite as superstitious as some countries, I don't think.
I mean, I would say there's like certain segments that are like baseball players.
Oh, yeah.
Tend to be super superstitious.
Yeah.
Athletes, super superstitious. But like we also subscribe to the world view that if you build a hotel, you skip the 13th floor.
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, it goes from 12 to 14, even though 14 is technically the 13th floor.
Okay.
But if we just put a 14 on it, it's not really 13.
So, yeah, we're not superstitious to the same degree that a lot of other places are. Looking at you, Sicily. Looking at you, Mexico.
Where are we shooting? Are we taking our own shots here? What are we doing?
Yeah, I guess we are. Sorry. We haven't even got to the bishop shooting at the Pope here.
We're teeing it up, though.
We are teeing it up. The point being, we do have myths here in the United States. I was thinking George Washington. Like in the U.S. Capitol building, there's many paintings of George Washington, and he's positioned as if he's a Greek god.
Yes.
And he has like all of the virgins around him adoring him and worshiping him.
It's called Congress.
That was good. They're not in town this week nor next week.
Yeah. Oh, weird.
Yeah. But we have myths, because a myth can be true. You and I debated this a little bit. A myth is basically, although people use it in an insulting way, it's a Genesis story.
Yeah.
It's talking about the foundation of your country or humanity or your planet, whatever. It's a story that often involves something supernatural, but it's meant to kind of like highlight this is how we got here. So with George Washington literally depicted as a god in the Capitol, with that story about him chopping down the cherry tree, which apparently never happened.
The man threw his back out if he tried.
We don't know about that, but
prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong. So we're not like that. The Dutch, the Flemish, the people in Belgium, they are definitely not like that. They have no sense of romance. They're like, should we get married? There's no like, let me do a homecoming proposal. It's like, no, let's go to the courthouse and sign the papers. They have no romance, no myth. They please tell me the answer. We do not have time for this.
They're saying that they didn't go on a reality TV show to find love and then drag it out for 4 weeks and then go to the altar. And then
I don't think there could be a Love is Blind Belgium. I don't think they could.
Have you watched Love is Blind Germany?
I have.
Spicy.
Spicy, yeah.
I like it.
So the point being, for the people in Belgium, they look at what they already see as an optional celibacy for the priesthood. Mm-hmm. Now, is priesthood celibacy optional?
Theoretically, no, right? The church has gone back and forth on this, right? Like the early church, priests had families, had spouses, and then it changed to priestly celibacy because the thought process behind it was, the priest's family is their flock, their parish. That's what they need to spend their time on. They can't do that if they're focused on their own family, kind of thing, right?
Hold on. I don't want to call BS on that because there's like a lot of truth in that, but that's an example of a myth story.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I brought it up. So like the whole thing is that we see it as tradition, little t, because of the longevity of the practice of priestly celibacy, which means it's a changeable teaching. It's not a capital T tradition. So it's not optional per se, but it's something that in practice, it's strictly you're celibate.
Now, let's be clear here. Celibacy, whether chosen or by grace, is beautiful.
Yes.
Okay? We're not trying to challenge it here. We're trying to go deeper into what are the questions that we are asking and what are the questions that we are not allowing people to ask.
Yes.
So maybe this is slightly unfair, but if you zoom back 1,000 years, the church is now pretty large, right?
Yes.
When the church was small and you didn't have, tens of thousands of priests, they could get married, and if there were a family issue, you could handle that. The church gets so big, across the centuries, and now you have to decide: do we just have priests be celibate, or we find new ways to deal with all of the scandals, right? Whether that's the reality of the priest here and there cheating, or a priest here and there, no longer being in love with their wife, and the flock has taken notice. Okay. As the church got bigger, it became increasingly more of a liability.
And expensive.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're going. That Bishop Bonny is like, listen, we are upholding canon law for its own sake. He said in an article written in Italian in a very big Catholic publication in Rome.
Flemish to Italian.
Which is, by the way, that's how you know he wanted Rome to take note, because there's no reason for him to write in Italian. He wanted them to see this and not just know that he's doing this as an experiment. Bishop Bonny announced that in 2028, he will be ordaining married men as priests. And that is groundbreaking for a bishop to do that on his own, to kind of like step out. This man was on the staff of the Vatican under John Paul II. He was appointed to his current role by Pope Benedict. He is an excellent, honestly, as a theologian, he could run circles around most of the bishops in the United States. The question becomes, he's clearly making a strategic decision to challenge the Vatican and force their hand on something. Is that appropriate? Is that revolutionary in a holy way? Is he overplaying his hand? Is this politics? But the point is, in Belgium, the people there think about priestly celibacy as an excuse for the church to not have to bother to take care of their priests.
Correct.
Because, John, what would happen if we had married priests?
You then would have to. So right now, you have one rectory for all the priests assigned to that parish.
A rectory is the house
yeah.
where they live. Yeah.
So now, if you have 3 priests at this parish and they're all married, I don't think pastor wife A, B, and C would like living under the same roof in a tiny house. They would want their own separate house. That's money. And then I would assume, let's take a look, here in the US, then you'd have healthcare costs. You would have everything else that would come with it too, that theoretically the church would be on the line for, since their husband is employed by the church.
So a friend and I were going back and forth on this. Again, we had this understanding that this is not really our business. Yeah. We're not called to be priests. This is something for the Pope to decide. Theologically, obviously, you can have married priests. Is it prudent? Is it okay? Are we prepared to do it? And he said, why not the Amazon region first? Because they've been requesting this for a long time because of how sparse the population is. Mm-hmm. And you can have someone go, 5-6 years without seeing a priest there. And I said, you know what? It might be that the Amazon is a very practical place to do this, because the cost of providing for a family in that region is much lower than in Belgium. As soon as you have married priests in Belgium, you got to worry about retirement benefits, savings at least. They have a pretty good welfare network. You have to worry about paying for housing, making sure they have enough. Because what happens when they retire? They're not going into a priest and family home.
Yeah.
We don't have like a nursing home for this setup. So the church has to think through these things through. And I guess what I would say is, I really hope that Pope Leo doesn't discourage the discussion because we don't have the financial means. I want him to allow the questions to be asked, but I want it to be on the theological basis and what's best for the people, and not because of political considerations or recruitment or whatever.
So in a roundabout way here, this is something that the church actually recently, in recent times, kind of toyed with when the church allowed Anglican priests who are allowed to be married,
yeah,
and they converted to Catholicism to continue their priestly practices in the Catholic Church, they were not forced to divorce or be annulled or whatever. Their families came with them. That was, I believe, like the early 1990s when that really started to kick up. And that was pretty big in the United Kingdom. That was big in the US, where, we're talking hundreds of Anglican priests converted to Catholicism and were able to continue their priestly ordination and duties.
And that was actually around the same time, I believe. It was under Pope Benedict.
Yes.
And it was around the same time that Bishop Bonny was appointed by Pope Benedict to his current role. So it's so funny. The comment section was like, oh my gosh, that Bergoglian Pope Francis liberal bishop. And I'm like, actually, he's not liberal. So I don't know. Thankfully, I don't have to decide. But, a real consideration for the church will have to be, if we have tens of thousands of married priests, how do we honor the sacrifice of the current priests who are celibate? How do we deal with the fact that here and there we're going to have some scandals that we're not prepared to address? So that was a shot fired. The Vatican has not responded to that yet, but I guarantee you they will.
As of this recording.
As of this recording, we are in Tuesday of Holy Week.
Just throw it out there. So if you're listening to it, like when this releases and you're listening to this on Saturday, and
you're like, that bishop was fired.
We're like, actually, the Pope did respond. We had we invaded Antwerp. No, we're not doing that.
Oh man. Okay. All right. So look, we're in the Easter Triduum, at least because this episode's being released on Holy Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that people don't realize is that Lent is over.
What?
That's right. When does Lent end?
Thursday.
The evening of Holy Thursday,
yes.
Yeah. And let's talk about what the Triduum is real quick. So historically, Holy Thursday was the great time of return. So it took until the 8th century before the idea of confession was something that you were doing as an individual and you could do more than once in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, it was a once in a lifetime thing and super public. So you often waited till you were close to death, or if you had committed murder or something super scandalous, you're like, okay, I'll take my forgiveness now.
I'll do it now.
I'll do it because you were kicked out of the church.
Yes.
You couldn't be part of the community if you had this grave sin. So Holy Thursday was a time when the bishop would go outside of the church where the sinners were waiting and super joyfully, this is not like a moment of exclusion. Holy Thursday was a time where the bishop, as a father, would take the people by the hand and walk them into the church where all the other members of the congregation were, and he would yell in Latin, "Come, come, come," in like a very joyful tone to kind of announce that like my son is here, my daughter's here. He would take them by the hands and he would then announce loudly in Latin, "May God forgive you." I do think it's interesting, by the way, because the words of absolution were not "I forgive you," as it's like mandatory now.
Mm-hmm.
The words were "May God forgive you." But it was a moment of like this physical reconnect. In corporate lingo, they always say touching gloves, which I hate, but that's like basically, it was a physical reconnect. And so I think we've lost a little bit of that sense of Holy Thursday.
So the priest brought these sinners into the church and there was no strings attached, right? They didn't have to do anything. It was in that moment, the priest brought them in and God forgave them, right? So I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, actually a friend who's part of the family that helped me during my conversion process. We were talking and him and his wife and kids went back to the parish closest to where they live. They were driving 30, 40 minutes away.
Sure.
So they went back to the parish that they lived close to, and he went to confession and they registered at the parish and everything. They've been going there now, and I was going to confession, and he was telling me, and we've talked about some pretty bad horror stories when it comes to confession. He was telling me that his first, second, third, and fourth confession with this priest, the priest spent 5, 6, 7 minutes asking him questions after he confessed his sins. The priest was asking him questions personal questions.
No.
How old are you? You're married, right? Wait a minute.
Oh.
You're new to the parish.
Well, this is like a classic case of priest detective.
Exactly. Started asking questions, trying to identify who was behind the screen. And he was telling me he felt super uncomfortable.
Definitely.
And I was appalled when he was telling me this. And then he went on to tell me that if he didn't answer the priest's questions to the priest's satisfaction, the priest literally told him, I am not required to give you absolution if you do not answer my questions satisfactorily.
Oh my gosh.
I kid you not. I pulled my car over because we were driving when he was telling me this. And I looked at him and I said, you tell me who that priest is. I'm gonna go talk to him. Cause like, I wanted to go full Karen on him because that was so I was offended on his behalf that a priest had the audacity to chastise someone who was there for God's forgiveness and then hold his forgiveness as a condition of answering super invasive questions in the confessional.
Can you imagine if like the early church liturgy for Holy Thursday wasn't like, come, but it was opening the doors and I am not obligated to forgive you.
But if you are between the ages of 20 and 23, you may enter now.
Childbearing age?
24 and 27, enter now. Like, can you imagine if the priest was like trying to like gauge who was coming in and sending all these? It's like boarding a flight. Boarding group 1. Please come into the parish.
Well, I mean, what you described is, but technically true, right? But it is never acceptable for the priest to hold that over the head of a penitent. So the assumption is mercy. And kind of what you described, this, unfortunately, John, this is not the worst case of priest detective that I've heard.
Oh, I know.
Okay, so it's every now and then it's a little bit more sinister. Thankfully, none of this on the whole is an average commonplace experience. So I don't want people who haven't been to confession in a long time to think, do I need to be prepared for that? Just remember that if you are ever unsure, or if a priest says that to you, you have permission to say, Father, I came here for mercy, and I am not obligated to say my act of contrition today and would like to do this at a different time. And then you can walk out. So remember to stand up for yourself, because the liturgy, it's supposed to touch you where you're most vulnerable in a healing way, never in a controlling way. And so, yeah, what you just described is like a reversal of the liturgy, and it's a culture of exclusion. So today at the office, I love cultural conversations because most of us in there are Catholic, but we have 3 or 4 Protestants, and we love them equally.
Like you had to say that.
No,
that was like segue just for our Protestants.
No, the fun thing is that there isn't actually any tension. Every now and then we tease one another, but it's because we know each other so well.
Playful jabbing's always fun.
I was sitting silent. I love sitting silent and just watching these things unfold. And somebody getting ready to take off the rest of the week goes, "Happy Easter, everyone." And one of the Protestant staffers stood up and said, "You can't say that. Jesus hasn't even died yet. We're not at the resurrection."
Oh, no.
And this is where I decided to get involved. I stood up and I said, "Excuse me, what is the expiration date on the resurrection?"
Oh, I like that.
Well, he said, "Well, there isn't one." Correct. And I said, "That's right. You are still living right now in this moment in the resurrection.
No expiration date, no shelf life."
Correct. Until you can tell me the moment that Jesus was like, "Oh, poof, I'm back in the tomb." John just fell out of his chair.
It was the way you said it, and then your arm motion as you demonstrated what poof looks like.
Yeah, the poof, they put him back in the tomb. No, until you can give me this expiration date, it's not real. You are living in Easter.
Correct.
So the correct way to understand the Triduum is not that you have this 24-hour clock where Holy Thursday is from midnight to 11:59 p.m.
Eastern Standard Time.
I would think Central Europe time, because that's at least Rome.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
But surprise, surprise, God does not work on a 24-hour clock.
What?
Yeah. And so Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Vigil, that is not 3 events. Jon, take it from here. How many events is that?
It's one event.
It's one event. We say the death and resurrection of our Lord. They go together. Do not separate them. Do not separate them. And so, Andrea Grillo, one of our favorite sacramental theologians, he talks about how the Easter mystery, it's not something that happens like when the sun comes up on Sunday. The Easter mystery exists within the Triduum, all of it. And so the first day, which is Thursday evening to Friday evening, it's fair to mention that for the Jews and for the church, the celebrations start at sundown.
Correct.
Okay. So from Thursday evening to Friday evening is the first day. And that's the ritual Easter and the historical Easter. It's the Easter without rites. The second day, which is Friday evening to Saturday evening, that is the, eschatological. That's waiting in the silence of the tomb. And then the third day, that's from Saturday evening, so the vigil, to Sunday evening, that is celebrating the resurrection itself. But this is all one event.
Yes.
And that's why, it may surprise people that the church and the early church use Holy Thursday as the day of return.
Mm-hmm.
But how could it not be? The Easter event has started.
Correct. It's one event.
One event.
So if the idea of the Triduum being one event is confusing, isn't there also confusion over what constitutes the 40 days of Lent?
Oh, dude. I have to look this up every year because I never quite remember. I feel like growing up, going to Catholic school, 3rd grade, Sister Mary Carmen, she had one explanation. She was like, it begins on the first Friday in Lent, and then it ends with this, And then 6th grade, Sister Mary Christine, totally different explanation. She was like, it begins on Ash Wednesday, but Sundays don't count.
And that's what I was told as a convert was it begins Ash Wednesday and Sundays don't count.
I mean, that's correct, right? But did you know that there are 5 dioceses in Italy and 1 diocese in Switzerland that don't even have Ash Wednesday?
In Italy and Switzerland.
Yes. So these are much closer to the Pope than we are.
Universal.
Yeah, no. So that's the thing. Universal, it doesn't mean uniform.
Correct.
It means unity. But yes, there are 6 dioceses super close to Rome in the sense that they're in, northern Italy and southern Switzerland. And they don't even have the concept of Ash Wednesday. And so Lent for them begins on a Sunday. So I don't know. I don't fret about counting the 40 days. 40 days, clearly, it's a very important number in the Bible. It's a time of renewal.
Mm-hmm.
It's preparing to come back when Lent ends on Holy Thursday. But I don't know, dude. Don't ask me to count. Don't ask me what a handkerchief is in terms of 1st or 2nd class relics either.
I literally had this conversation with my friend on Saturday when we were taking a U-Haul truck to the landfill. We had this conversation, and he's a cradle Catholic. He took his phone out and literally counted from Ash Wednesday to the Triduum, skipping Sundays, and it was exactly 40 days.
Oh my gosh. Well, what happens during leap years? We're not going there. This is a theology podcast. And
in leap years, it's 41 days of Lent.
Okay. You're right. Jesus is just a little bit more angry that year.
Every Catholic school kid's worst nightmare, an extra day of Lent.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Speaking of confusing. So, yeah, we just talked about how the Triduum in itself contains Easter. It's the Easter event, which is still ongoing, right? So it's not this legal understanding or this 24-hour clock, but I can understand why that is super confusing to a lot of people. And actually, there's a comedian on TikTok, Queen Erin the First.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So she went viral, I don't know, late last year, maybe in October. Most of her content isn't Christian related, but she did this whole series. Super crass, super inappropriate, but she's basically playing back to you what she hears when people describe their Christian faith to her. Go ahead, play a clip.
Get rid of the sin that he put in you because he hates it. But listen, because he loves you. And so he knew, though, when he killed his son, that his son wasn't really dead. he was going to come back again. And when he came back, he was only going to be dead for 3 days. And from Friday night to early Sunday morning is 3 days, no matter what you can count. And so...
Yeah, the no matter how you count, that's 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's confusing. We just talked about how the Triduum, for some people, this may be breaking news to them that it's one event.
Yeah,
right. You know, and in 3 days, we talked about sunset to sunrise, and all sorts of stuff constituting what days are. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how it's confusing.
The whole goal for Catholics, and I think this is really missed, especially for Catholics who are, divorced or gay, or just for whatever reason you're not fitting into your parish. The whole goal of Easter is for you to be able to understand that you are living within this event of the resurrection. Yeah, it's a party that happened 2,000 years ago. The party's still going on. Yes, you're late to the party, but you're still there. You're part of the story. And so what does that mean for your life? In the United States, at least, actually all of English-speaking Catholicism, we've really devolved what Jesus' death means into something super legal, almost like a debt being paid off.
Yeah.
So when you look at the way Jesus behaves in the Bible, there's this pattern of restoring people, restoration. Okay? It's not a pattern of paying off debts. I was thinking of how to explain this earlier, and along the restoration model, I just moved into a home. We got a lot of furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been to Ikea before?
Who hasn't been to Ikea?
Okay. This is a true test for couples. Look, if you want to know if he or she is the one, early on, you go to Ikea and you sit down and you assemble furniture together.
Yes.
Okay. So think about it this way. You are walking down the hallway in your home and you notice that your partner, your friend, whatever, is like really screwing up the IKEA instructions.
Really struggle busting it.
Yeah. When you have all of those parts, the nuts, the bolts, the plywood just everywhere, and you're trying to figure out where things go, and it's not coming together, is there any sense of meaning in the project that you have in front of you?
No.
I mean, if it's not coming together, if it's going to maintain itself as a pile of rubble, we've talked about this before. The word for symbol in Greek, it means throwing things together. Things that shouldn't be there together, it means throwing them together. That's a symbol. The opposite of that is the devil. The same Greek word, root word for devil, is to scatter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you're looking at the scattered IKEA pieces everywhere, theologian Neil Ormerod says that basically we can understand evil as something that's just void of meaning. There's no meaning there, right? It's scattered.
So are we comparing IKEA furniture to the devil?
If the company reaches out to me, I'm going to say that wasn't the intention. I love IKEA, okay?
IKEA's great. I love IKEA also. It's a fantastic store.
But unassembled on the floor, scattered, I mean, it does resemble the Greek word for devil.
Yes.
Okay? So, let's suppose that you're walking down the hallway and you see your partner or whatever just screwing this all up, and you go, honey, let me help you. What's the reaction that always happens?
So you know how Planet Fitness has the lunk alarm that goes off?
Yeah.
The pride alarm goes off.
Yep.
No, I can do it myself. And then you normally respond back with, but you've been doing this for 2 hours.
2 hours. It's always 2 hours.
And bag A has been opened, bag B has been opened, but bag C through W have not been touched. Do you need help? Coming from a place of love, do you need help?
So you get yelled at, right?
Yep.
Or crucified. And so, no, that's kind of where we're going with this, is you have to understand that God created us from an act of love. God is not out there trying to trap us, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not like, as the comedian suggested, like, ooh, I decided that this is evil and I'm going to wait till they do it. And then I'm going to come down there, I'm going to die. That's not the plot. The plot is this restoration. You can't do this. There's a void of meaning. I'm coming to bring meaning. Pope Leo gave a speech on Easter a couple weeks ago, and he talked about this meaning that comes into Christians' lives because of the Easter event, which is still going. Okay. I love that he said that. This is also on display when you're in Washington, D.C. and you see someone trying to parallel park.
Oh my gosh. Whether I'm a passenger in the car of someone trying to parallel park, or if I'm watching someone else attempt, I say that word not lightly, attempt to parallel park, whether it's their depth perception is way off and their gigantic Yukon is not going to squeeze into the space that only a Honda Civic could get into, or whether it's someone driving a Mini Cooper trying to parallel park into a spot a semi-truck could fit into. It's very frustrating to watch.
And if you know the person and you live in, let's say that you're in DC, your friends are coming to visit and you're watching this on the street, there's always a little bit of embarrassment when the homeowner comes out and they're like, hey, do you want me to jump in the car and park it for you?
Yep. Done that before.
And what happens?
That pride alarm goes off again. Oh, I can do it. Yeah. You're holding traffic up.
So again, these are two crass examples, but it kind of mimics what you have here because we've messed up so bad because of sin. Neil Ormerod, in his thoughts and his writings, he says, not even God understands why we sin because it is fundamentally irrational, right? If we're created to be with him and we're doing things that are not compatible with that idea, then we are void of meaning. And so let's stop thinking about the cross as like Jesus paying off a really large debt. That doesn't make sense. To me, to Catholics, it does not make sense. Okay. I understand that there's a lot of really good theology out there for many Protestant denominations. Here we're talking about the Catholic thought, right? And so we're void of meaning, or we've lost so much of our meaning by our own choices. And Christ is like, let me come down there and restore the meaning. Okay. By God becoming one of us. Like, how cool is that? The Big Bang and everything that was before. And it's like, let me come down there and be one of them. Inherently makes being a human a lot cooler.
It is pretty cool.
Especially when you consider that the resurrection's still happening. So we say Jesus has this human body too. Like, he's one of us.
Yep.
So, again, sin is a void of meaning. And this sense of atonement or the at-one-ment, it's a recreation where the suffering that you and I experience on a day-to-day basis, it's giving birth to something new. It's not a penalty. And so, divine revelation, what we're celebrating right now as we start this Easter event again together, divine revelation is God's way of entering into our story, and he's taking part in the meaning making of man. The meaning making is how Neil Ormerod describes it. Now, John, you remember when you converted at the Easter Vigil, there is this lighting of the Paschal candle and then a really, really long song. Do you remember that part?
Exalted?
Exalted, yeah. And there's a line in the song that says, "Oh, happy fault of Adam." What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting line, right?
It definitely stops you. You're like, ooh, what? His sin is a happy fault.
Well, yeah, because I feel like, is it only happy looking back on the events of Christ coming to earth and dying for our sins? Is it only a happy sin because it resulted in the ultimate act of love being God becoming man and dying for our sins
and resurrecting
for the death of our sins? Is that the only reason why it's the happy sin of Adam? If the death and resurrection of Christ didn't happen yet, right? Let's say, Jesus, his ministry has not started yet. Are we still saying, "Oh, happy sin of Adam"? No, we're seeing that as a moment of humanity doing the one thing God told us not to do, and that's sin. So that ultimate act of love has not happened yet. So we can't sit there and be like, "Oh, it's tragically happy," if you will.
It's definitely a confusing statement, but think about it. Because Jesus came in the way that he did and died and resurrected for us, he gave us a model of restoration. So like when you think back to the early church and the bishop taking the sinners by the hand and yelling, come back in, come in. We have that model because of the resurrection. There are theologians like James Allison who talks about the atonement. Atonement is usually that term for Jesus paying off the debts. But there's many ways to think of atonement, including, Jesus was kicked out by the leaders. The leaders were like, oh, no, you do not come in here and change our rules and make our walls fall down. And they kicked him out of the fold. And who had the last laugh? Jesus came back. And when he came back in the resurrection, he dissolved the boundaries so that now everyone has that space in the church.
You mentioned he dissolved those boundaries, right? So if we tie that back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode with Wilkins, for far too long, the strategy was to wall out the crisis. What was the crisis? When Jesus dissolved those walls, he invited everyone in with the dissolving of those walls.
St. Augustine, doctor of the church, said, "For God judged it better to bring good out of evil than to not permit any evil to exist." So I think you're right. Again, this all plays into that pattern of restoration that we see Jesus delivering to humankind. And, I want to remind people, historically, humankind and the church respond to anything that's new, anything that's difficult, in a really uncreative and flat-footed manner. And that's something that I learned from Professor Wilkins. He said, Catholic leaders were looking at the modern world, as democracy came about in the 18th and 19th century, that evil, bad democracy and all those changes. And it was scary, okay? Change is scary. We're in a period of change now. It's only going to get more rapid, especially as AI develops. And there's this temptation for the church to respond in an uncreative and flat-footed manner by refusing to understand the world. Jesus, on the other hand, challenges us and challenged the religious leaders of his time. Don't rely on your own logic, your own intelligence, but instead discover the world that God put you in. Don't refuse to understand the world. Encounter and restore. And so for anyone that's listening who feels like, hey, the church is just not appreciating my situation, or the church treats me as a project to be fixed, or I'm not being listened to, I'm being judged. Hey, these are real things that have to be addressed, okay? But I pray and I trust that Pope Leo is putting the right people in the Vatican to start looking at this, to make sure that we all have avenues to say what's going on in our lives and to allow the church that space to respond in better and healthier ways than we have in the past. The resurrection is an event that is ongoing, and that is why I have hope. And so as we close tonight, I want to wish you all a very happy and blessed start to this Easter season. It's a long season, and I want you to reflect on what it means for you. We're late to the party, right? We're 2,000 years late to the party, but the party is still going on. What does it mean to know that Christ desires to be in your life exactly as you were created, exactly as you are, and he desires to be with you? And that is a gift to the church. So never suppress things, never push things away. You belong, and the church is increasingly learning how to do that. Until next time, have a blessed Easter. We'll talk to you soon.